Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to PEX Network's OPEX Financial Services event. It's great to have you with us. And as you're joining and getting settled here, I'm delighted to welcome you to what we really hope will be a two-way experience as we go forward through the session. My name is Georgina Vilcek. I'm the conference director and event host. And if you need anything at all, you can contact me via the links at the bottom of your screen, very likely if you're joining us on laptop. So please put your questions for any of our participants into the Q&A that you can see at the bottom, and we'll aim to factor in any of your thoughts as we go along, simply because we are live on air and we're keen for this to be as creative a dialogue as possible. So, OPEX in financial services, it's a fantastic topic, a very rich seam of content, obviously, because it is a very rich area of change. So thank you very much for helping to join in that conversation. And through the day, we hope to give you some really useful ideas that can help to enrich your own strategies for accelerating the operational excellence of your own organizations. So without further ado, I'm delighted to get our first session started here today. We are going to be entering into a panel discussion, which will be chaired by Michael Hill, who is the editor of the PEX network here. And we're also lucky enough to be joined by Stephen Don, who is the head of transformation delivery at the Nottingham, and Rahul Zende, who is the principal data scientist for Navy Federal Credit Union. So if I can ask you gentlemen to come through and join me, that would be fantastic. And we'll shortly get underway. Hi, Michael, welcome.
Hi, Georgina. Thanks so much for the intro. Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Stephen.
So, Michael, I know you're going to be starting off with an introduction to set this conversation off to a good start. And we've also got a poll for everybody that we can get onto slightly later into the conversation as well. So I'll let Michael tell you all about that. Yes, absolutely. Anything you need, please do drop us a line. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Georgina. Yes, hello, everyone. Really excited to be here for this opening panel session and to be joined by two fantastic speakers for tackling our topic, which is obviously setting the scene of OPEX in financial services today. So a really interesting and engaging topic to be looking at today. So what I'm going to do is ask our speakers to very quickly just introduce themselves and just share a bit of background as to who they are and the work that they do, and then we'll dive into our discussion. So Rahul, I'll come to you first.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul. I work at Navy Federal Credit Union in the US. I'm a principal data scientist here, and my career has spanned about 10 years working at different financial services companies. I've worked at Wells Fargo before in a different capacity. That's a few words about me, and I will pass it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Rahul. I'm Stephen Don. I head up the transformation delivery at Nottingham Building Society, very similar to a credit union in the US, but in the UK. Prior experience for me is 25 years in industry, and that's the finance. Key roles that I've held is looking at properly tech and change transformation with people and process. And then I've headed up operations as well. So a very much full collection of what I would say tech, people and process change.
Fantastic. Well, big thank you to both of you for being here with us, and I can't wait to dive into your experience and your thoughts. So as Georgina mentioned, we're going to have a poll question that I'm going to launch in just a minute or so, but I do want to remind viewers that we have the Q&A button on your screen there, and you can use that to submit any questions that you've got for either speaker. So do feel free to use that. I'll be checking that throughout the session for any questions that come in. You can also just share any comments that you have. You can let us know where you're viewing from, or just share any thoughts or reactions to any of the discussion that we're having. And again, we'll keep an eye on that. So I'll kick things off with the poll question then. So what we want to know is, what do you see as your biggest OPEX challenge? And we've got a few options. I'm just going to launch that one now, so you should see it on your screen. But you can see that you've got implementing new technologies as one option. You've got the cost of OPEX implementation as another, change management and cultural alignment, and stakeholder and business buy-in. So I'm going to leave that running for, well, the next several minutes at least, to give everyone time to vote on that really interested to kind of get your thoughts on that, and we'll touch upon the results of that a bit later in the session. But to start the discussion then, Stephen, I'll come to you first. How are you seeing the evolving OPEX landscape impacting modern financial services?
It's an interesting question. In particular, from my side of things, it's probably evolved more into what can we do with technology space, what can we do with the methodology of delivery, in particular from a change. But if I go back to its simplistic form, I'd probably go from an evolving perspective. Actually, we'd move into things like continuous improvement. Okay, what would I say with that continuous improvement linked back with more of a change methodology? Well, a lot of work in, from what I've seen over probably the last 10 years, is evolving into agile ways of working, looking in particular with how that might work, but at the core of it, continuous improvement is still there. If I'm looking at what I do today, I'm evolving very much into working on a pod or squad delivery. I've done that in the last few roles that I've had, and that's very much evolving into quicker to market, ensuring that you've got the market share in particular in that space, and that fail fast piece. And I think that then linked in with the technologies that can come together is probably the biggest thing that I'm seeing evolving in particular, at a very high level, to then move it into what I'd class as a modern way of working.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Stephen. And Rahul, come to you as well on that same point. OPEX is, it's always been an important facet of business operations, of course, but something that is evolving very much in line with technology. How are you seeing the shift now in financial services in terms of the role that OPEX is playing for businesses?
I think very critical. Of course, the US, speaking microeconomically, is going through some different times right now compared to the past few years we've seen in the industry. I think speaking along those lines, the financial services industry is definitely looking to optimize things from a cost perspective as well as from a benefit perspective. So those things both feature very well into the OPEX theme here. I think we, as an industry, are increasingly looking to leverage new technology, but are very, very about the costs and how we're going to bring in that technology into the scope of things, into the scheme of workings that we have within our companies here. At Navy Fed, if I were to speak for my company, we try to do the same, try to strike a good cost benefit balance here. And the focus is entirely on how much this moves the needle for member experience. We're strongly focused on how things change for our members if we try to bring in new processes from an OPEX perspective. So yeah, those are a few thoughts. I think one thing that we also keep in mind is the strict regulatory environment that we have here. Very conscious of how bringing in new technology or changing some of our processes affects our ability to stay compliant with regulations. So that's another key focus that we have in mind going forward.
Yeah, great points made there, Rahul. Thanks for those. And Stephen, just to come back to you then. I mean, we're going to touch on challenges in a moment with our poll question that's running, so I'm going to leave that aside for the time being. But in terms of looking at the standout opportunities or potential here in terms of what OPEX can offer financial services organizations, what do you see as kind of key there? What real potential benefits do you think are really coming to the fore now?
I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing in particular with this and is that culture change that can come through. So talking in particular, if I look at continuous improvement of what would be there, I think Rahul, coming to your point and going out to the market and obviously changing that agility, what do I want from my teams and what have I seen in other roles that I've done? It's those people that are at the front line, able to move fast, be able to get myself to market fast. But that does really need that culture of empowerment, looking at what you deliver as an outcome, the metrics around that. So I think that for me is the biggest opportunity that's here, because the markets, for me in particular here in the UK, is moving faster than it ever has before. Change, and when we talk about technology, I could be looking at something tomorrow and getting that live, but it'll probably be out of date the following day. So it's that piece of how do I how do I build something? And that's why I look at the culture in particular with agility to go, that's not working for our customers, that's not working for our colleagues, and having that empowerment to then change that quite quickly. So I think the opportunity's there, but it actually goes much further with the industry we're in. Rahul, you mentioned the regulatory change side of things in particular. Regulation in the UK absolutely is changing, but even getting to that point of going, does it mean this, or does it mean A, does it mean B? That agility is the piece. So I think there's a real kind of opportunity for us there. But that's probably one of those harder bits, because when I talk about tech, it's very tangible, isn't it? But that empowerment of people and colleagues across, for me, the society is a real win.
Yeah, great points made there, Stephen. I think that's definitely going to come up in the poll results, just looking at them at the moment. Just a reminder, that poll question is live on the biggest OPEX challenges the businesses are facing. So I'll leave that open for a few more minutes. So if you've not had a chance to vote on that one, please do vote on that, and we'll be reviewing the results very shortly. But Rahul, just comes to you as well, touching on the potential opportunities and, areas for advancement really in financial services. What do you see as the key potential areas in terms of how OPEX, everything that goes along with that, new technologies, but cultural evolving as well. What do you see as the key benefits that organizations can achieve today?
Yep, definitely. Before answering that, Michael, I would agree with Stephen so much. It's so true that we have to manage change properly with all of these new technologies coming in. I think everything that's happening, exactly as Stephen said, things can change overnight, and we have to really bring in that mindset within the company that folks need to be okay with that. Folks need to be okay with moving fast and breaking things, right? This is something that often gets associated with the technology side of the industries, not in the financial services space, maybe as much as they do in the technology space. Really bringing about that mindset shift is key. I think moving back to your question now, Michael, yeah, I think there's tons of benefits. I think from my perspective, what I see is the financial services industry has a lot of offenses and defenses it can do when it comes to bringing in OPEX to improve how it's functioning as a company as well as an industry. Think about fraud detection and those kinds of use cases. We have tons of automation that can be brought in that can really enhance and bolster our defenses against so many attackers. We have more attack surfaces or surface areas today than we've ever had before, and that's simply a consequence of how much technology and how much channels we try to serve our members, our customers through, right? Things like that. I think there's a lot of scope to change the way our processes work and bring in technology to bolster how the team members at the credit union try to use technology as well as their processes to improve our response to such things. That's another example. That's one example. Another example, I think, is loan processing. Even today, loan processing happens to be a very document-heavy effort. I think we are trying to do a lot with OCR and image recognition technology, things like that, to speed up the process. It doesn't need to have as much time taken in the process as it used to before. So we're trying to improve that as well, using a combination of training our employee and our workforce to use technology to do things faster. Of course, there's a bit of skepticism involved as well. We have to train employees and workforces to use the technology without bringing in that skepticism, kind of overcome and see the benefits that it brings in, counteract some of the cons that the technology might have bringing in into the process. And then, follow a very we call this at Navy Fed, we call this a do learn approach, do learn grow approach, really piloting things at a small level and then taking it to the next level by learning through each of your pilot initiatives, really learning. I'm not just saying that we're learning, we're tracking metrics, really learning what went right, what went wrong, and then scaling it as large as possible across the enterprise. Those are a few things that come to my mind.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Rahul. And you're absolutely right. I think, financial services is a sector that's, very, very process heavy and, complex and a lot of moving parts, like you mentioned, the regulatory and compliance element is key as well. very sensitive data floating around, and it's, it's something that users, rely upon, they really care about, and that usability piece as well. People want their financial services to be, streamlined and quick, and have access to their financials and be able to do things around their financials easily and quickly, but still have that trust that things like data is being kept secure, processes are, quick and efficient and streamlined. So lots of moving pieces, and it sets us up very nicely to move on to what we see as some of the key challenges of OPEX for financial services. And obviously very much linked to our poll question that I'm just going to leave open for the next couple of minutes. So if you haven't voted yet, it's your last chance to get your votes in before I close it off. But Rahul, come to you first. What do you think are the biggest challenges that financial services organizations or financial services departments see with regards to OPEX and implementing OPEX and advancement in those areas?
Yeah, a few things I would like to highlight. The first thing is, of course, change management. Stephen spoke about that. The second thing is, I think processes need to change a bit when it comes to, driving change across the org. Some of our processes, they are pretty established, but they don't need to be set in stone. When it comes to OPEX, we often deal with a lot of legacy technology as well, right? Legacy technology and processes. Figuring out a process to maintain the benefits of the legacy systems and processes, and then bringing them over into a new, OPEX paradigm with a combination of technology and processes and the people involved is, I think, the key challenge. We struggle to do this, and we excel at doing this in different areas. There's a lot of benefit in exchanging ideas and notes between that. So we at NavyFed, we have a center of excellence that focuses on this, that exchanges ideas and notes about what went well within a certain effort within another part of the enterprise that could probably be taken notes down for and be applied within a different part of the enterprise. That way, we're striving to improve our knowledge of what works for us, what works for our workforce. What are the cost benefit analysis that we have seen pan out nicely for us versus some things that haven't. I think, yeah, those are a few things I would say are some of the key areas for us at NavyFed.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rahul. And I'm going to close off the poll now and bring up the results, and maybe Stephen throw a couple over to you to get your thoughts. So top answer, 54%, so quite a resounding top answer here, is change management and cultural alignment as the biggest challenge. So hopefully you can see the results on the screen. I've just clicked to share those. Yeah, a clear kind of winner there, if you like. And Stephen, we've touched on change management, cultural alignment a couple of times already. Are you surprised that that's such a clear amount of viewers find that a challenge?
Not really, no. I think that's similar to what my experience has been. So not necessarily in role today, but definitely in the last couple of roles that I've had, that buy-in from day one. I always go, technology is quite nice, isn't it? Because it's you can feel it, you can touch it, you can see it. So I'll have that nice shiny piece there, so it feels like you're able to do it. I think for me, culture change with what we look at for OPEX and that alignment, especially in the financial services. And again, going back, if I look at the multiple roles that I've had, it's that silo thinking. Come back, Rahul, you mentioned legacy technology there. So you've got natural silos with ways of working. And then you get the technology's the solution, not necessarily looking at the cultural side. So for me, actually, some of the biggest pieces is to get that alignment and buy-in early, and looking at exec in particular of what that could be done. How do you get the buy-in across function? So real good successes that I've had elsewhere, looking at let's do this together and work with some of the smaller challenges we might have in multiple teams, bring that together and go, okay, we can do a little bit. And we've just introduced that at Nottingham at the moment. So for us, we've just gone through a number of different process changes, all under one project wrapper. That's sparked lots of interest because it's now a kind of natural piece for people to go, oh, they've been able to have some investment, they've been able to go and move on to that basis. And that's seen that cultural shift of change happening. And as I said earlier, that's the culture change that I look at in particular. So not surprised it's there, but I think there's yeah, how to get that early buy-in to do that would be one of the things that I would be encouraging people to do, and really get in. If it's not necessarily those above in your peer group, start the movement naturally and organically.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the second highest result, 19%, is stakeholder business buy-in. So kind of linked there. So I mean, you put those two together, that's a massive bulk of the answer to the biggest challenges. So it is very interesting. 15% is the third biggest answer, which is cost of OPEX implementation, which is interesting because obviously, one of the key facets of OPEX is to reduce costs and drive efficiency. But interesting that you got this cost challenge of implementation in the first place. So Rahul, you're nodding your head there. I mean, that cost piece is quite a balance, isn't it? Okay, you want to be achieving OPEX to be cutting costs, but to get there, you're going to have to lay out costs along the way.
Agreed, very much so. It's kind of meta in that sense, right? We were trying to spend so much time, effort, and energy to be excellent in terms of operations, but then this seems to be like an overhead when it comes to costs and benefits. But I think, the key way to looking at it is it needs to be maybe center-led for it to be an overhead that's beneficial to the entire company or to the enterprise. That's key. The second thing I would say, instead of looking to increase the red tape through process excellence initiatives, I think there's a real need to strike a good balance between how much overhead we bring in and how much does that benefit the rollout of new processes and technology within the enterprise. That's the second piece that comes to mind. But yeah, I'm not concerned too much about the cost of OPEX implementation. I'm very happy to see that change management is recognized by our attendees today as one of the primary challenges. People say the key to solving a problem is building awareness about the problem itself first. I'm happy to see that our audience is already at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And telling to see that only 8% went for implementing new tech. We talk about tech so often, and it's such an important kind of facet in modern organizations. But that change management, cultural alignment piece seems to be so important still as well. Just looking to see a couple of questions that we've had come in. I'm going to tackle just a couple because they're very interesting. And I mean, one looks at, in terms of length of time, how long it can take generally for an organization to establish an OPEX culture within an organization, and what that looks like. Stephen, I know you're very much kind of on that journey. Do you have any thoughts in terms of timescales of what that can look like? And
I think there's answering that question is it'll all depend on what type of company that you're going into. I think that would be my caveat on that. However, I've just started a journey with Notting on that basis. If I look at my last role, that's probably a really good indication. And I would say to actually establish that culture up to 3 years, I'd say I had a tipping point very much around about 18 months to 2 years in. Lots of projects had been looked at, processes had been changed. There were some really good key metrics that were coming out of that. For customer experience had increased, colleague experience had increased. Complaints had obviously gone down on that basis. So that really got to that tipping point through the whole organisation. But I would honestly be saying it's around about that 18 months, 2 years before we can get there. Because I think for me, it's a start small and organically of where I've been recently. But obviously, come back to my first point of key challenges with getting that early buy-in. That could be done quicker, but I'd always err with maybe that 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, great comment we've had come in from Bill Turner, which is look at brand versus cost, start at core infrastructure and build up from there. That's likely to be the only way. And that very much goes back to what you were saying a minute or two, Rahul. So yeah, thanks Bill for that comment. Really appreciate that. Okay, you mentioned KPIs there, Stephen. So I might just spend a couple of minutes asking you both on that. But what are the best data points, metrics, KPIs to kind of focus in on, or what have you found the most useful in your careers for measuring OPEX? Rahul, I'll come to you first before I come to you, Stephen.
Yeah, definitely. I think from my side, I don't exactly sit in an OPEX org, so I don't exactly get to see the metrics that get used to evaluate. But I will say, I think if we have a center of excellence, I think that's the way to drive metrics and the evaluation or the calculation of those metrics. It's so easy to just roll over in a conversation and say, yeah, of course you need good metrics, and that influences the duration of the process excellence effort that you have going on in your org. Of course, the size of the org also matters. If you're talking about a small-sized org, you probably need to have different metrics to evaluate how much difference an initiative brings in, versus a large-size org. You have a very different talking point or a very different conversation going on there. In terms of metrics, one key metric I've seen is, of course, tracking how much of your initiatives are moving on. Stephen talked about moving to an agile way of working, right? Really tracking. So what we do at NavyFed, I can speak to some of that. We work in quarterly sequences. We have things scoped out for a quarter, and then we track closely how much of that we were able to accomplish within that quarter, how much of that gets to move to the next quarter, and why was it not possible to complete that within a given quarter. So at least if we talk about an initiative taking multi-year long durations to accomplish, I think having quarterly metrics that track how much was done, how much was left over, are we doing well, or are we tracking so much that we are getting too much in terms of carryover into the next quarters? That is a key thing to track from my perspective. Stephen could probably add way more to that from his perspective.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, in particular, it's trying to go, what are the key metrics and where do you want to measure? I look at two areas in particular, colleague and customer insights. So if I look at customer insight, probably people have heard this before, cycle times. A lot of what I've tracked in the past with all processes, in particular, last 3 roles that I've been in, mortgages in particular, how long is it taking? Because I think that's where you can really see a spike. So if there's something happening, it will tell you there's a problem. And then probably one that we don't necessarily focus on enough, but it comes back to the culture, is all the culture surveys. We do a huge amount in the last few organisations that I've been in, and that's really looking at engagement of my teams, how many projects are people doing, how are they feeling empowered to make change, etc. So some of those key metrics tell me, have I got the culture right? Coming back to the how long does it take? Actually getting some of those projects up and seeing multiple projects being delivered at multiple times gave me that, because then I could naturally see an engagement result go up as well at the same time. And then link it back to the first point that then came to customer insight, because I could see the cycle times coming down. So that's it, bringing it all together as one.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Thanks, Stephen. We've got one. We're right on the end of time for this session. But one last question I want to quickly tackle. There's another really good one before we invite Georgina back. So Paul Stone wants to know, who drives OPEX? Is it the business, IT, OPEX professionals, transformation teams? That's a great question, because where should OPEX be coming from, but where does it tend to come from? Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a combination of all. So if I can be really honest, if I look at it today, that's being driven from a central transformation change team out, and I think that's been a bit of a push, and then I've had a natural pull to that. Previous role, headed up operations, that came from me directly from an operations function to push to others across the organisation. But what I would say, it's central, and that gets you that centre of excellence as well. So, yeah,
I guess that very much kind of taps into what you were saying earlier, Rahul, about that centre of excellence piece that you've seen working. So yeah, great stuff. Okay, well, we've run out of time for this session. Thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. So thanks, Rahul, and thanks, Stephen, for joining me. I'll look to invite Georgina back onto the platform now, and she's going to take things from there. So, Georgina, welcome back.
Thank you very much, everyone. That was a really good conversation and a great opener to this session on operational excellence and how to get there. So thank you very much to everyone who's asked questions so far. And thank you to Michael for leading the conversation as well, so expertly. So we've had some great questions coming through from you all already. So thank you very much for that. And I was really interested to read your responses to the poll as well, and change management and cultural alignment just kind of coming out as the strongest element that everyone's really concerned about at the moment. It's really interesting to see that, because I think from the outside looking in, what we might expect is to see that it's more about the nuts and bolts than actually changing hearts and minds. Would you agree with that, Rahul, as someone who's really immersed in this day to day?
Agreed, very much so. I think we often, in terms of initiatives, we often lose the details. It's really key to be focused on the details of any effort. And that's why we should have dedicated folks. The last question we had, who drives these efforts, it really speaks to that in my mind. It's not about it being driven by the business or the IT. I think everything needs to mesh together properly. Each of those parts of the org are specialized in certain aspects of an initiative. It's really key to get feedback and get them to weigh in on how things are going for us to be able to successfully run through an effort.
Absolutely, because we know obviously how effective it can be when collaboration is really at the heart of any changing project in that way, to do with the center of a company, which is great. So over this next 30 minutes, Rahul and I are going to be diving a little bit deeper in terms of that nitty-gritty sort of details that are needed in order to facilitate change, but also to hear a little bit about Rahul's own outlook from where he sits in industry at Navy Federal Credit Union. So perhaps as we kick off our conversation, Rahul, you can just tell the audience a little bit about your setting and what Navy Federal Credit Union really does and how it operates. And I know you've been operational for a long time. So I suppose in common with many people who are joining here today from more mature organizations, when we talk about operational excellence, we're not just setting things up from scratch, we're moving from something that is perhaps quite aged and complex and intertwined with even more aged systems that we have to maybe reinvent and then deploy things on top of. It all can get a little bit complicated. So it'd be lovely to hear about that evolution of technology and yeah, what you anticipate are going to be the most important things for yourself as a company going forward over the year ahead, say.
Of course, happy to, Georgina. Thank you. I will give a quick introduction to Navy Fed and what we do here first. So Navy Federal is a pretty renowned organization here in the US. I wouldn't say everyone knows about Navy Federal as a banking institution, but that's for a specific reason. We are a credit union. And as some of you might know, credit unions in the US have a strict membership criteria that they need to stick to. Not everyone can be a member at Navy Federal, and we have a specific criteria that says folks that are members of the military, members of the Department of Defense, active or retired, both works for us, and then their families associated with folks who are active or retired with the military or DoD. Only those can be members at Navy Federal Credit Union. So our membership is strictly defined in those few principles. And as a result of that, the flip side of it is that we get to focus very specifically on our clientele and their needs, because we know where they're coming from. That's what makes Navy Federal different from a usual bank that would have customers coming in from all walks of life. We don't have that actually, because we know we have specific ways folks can be members at our credit union, so we can design products, services, and our offerings that are uniquely, catered to our clientele. Now, speaking of how many years we've been in business, I don't know the year at the top of my head. I'm really bad at numbers that way. It's funny. Coming from a principal scientist, it might seem weird coming from me, but I can do years very well. But we have been working for more than 100 years, of course. And Navy Federal has gone through a lot of transformations over time. One of the recent ones that I myself have been a part of. I joined Navy Fed during the pandemic in 2021, and I have been proud to call myself a participant of one initiative that we had for transformation. We called it a data transformation initiative within the enterprise. And it was all about moving on to doing our business from on-prem, on-prem database systems, on-prem compute systems, moving all of those into a cloud-based solution. Really large initiative. It spanned across all of the departments, because pretty much every department within Navy Federal does its own analytics, has its own data, has its own expertise, subject matter experts, everything, and they have a way of doing business, right? The entire effort spanned both technology as well as the training, the onboarding, and the culture changes that needed to be brought across the organization to actually adopt the cloud solutions that we were looking to bring in. And really make everyone proficient, make everyone comfortable using the new technology, make everyone move on from their previous systems, ways of working, to that new paradigm, which of course part of that was also conveying to everyone who was impacted by this change. One key thing was how much benefit is this change going to bring in, really conveying that to the workforce so that they have the buy-in. Of course, we talked about having leadership buy-in, stakeholder buy-in in the previous half an hour. But there's the other part, which is the folks who are not leaders really getting buy-in from team members at the credit union. It was a huge effort, and I think myself being a part of that effort, I myself stand to admire how well it was done. How we look back on what was the previous status quo that we found ourselves within the credit union, and where we are today, uniquely poised to be able to serve our members' needs, to be able to analyze all of the data, the growing load of data that we have coming into us as a credit union, so that we can offer improved products, improved services, everything that comes along with that. That's a mouthful. I know I spoke a lot. Any follow-ups on that, Georgina? I'm happy to dive deeper into those things.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, it's been a busy time, and I'm sure that your experience in implementing all of that and moving to the cloud is something which many here can relate to, particularly over this last half decade. COVID aside, the massive wave of digitization has impacted pretty much every organization out there, hasn't it? And the need to align everything, make systems quicker, in line with customer expectation, but the need to oil the wheels of motion inside every company has never been greater than it is today, one could argue. So I'm interested as well to find out about the technologies that you've been using to help that. I mean, obviously over this last couple of years, we've been hearing a lot more even than usual about automation and artificial intelligence, which obviously people within the inner workings of operational excellence were already very accustomed to, machine learning and so on. But it's been quite democratized, hasn't it, in the last couple of years with Gen AI and so on. Are you seeing that is also impacting the way in which the organization is operating, and how indeed you are implementing new technologies going forward?
It is very much so. Yeah, that is such a nice point to bring up today. I mentioned the transformation that we've gone through already, and we find ourselves at the precipice of another transformation potentially that is being brought in by all the development that's happening in the AI space. Speaking of Gen AI, I think every institution, it's not just banks actually. We can expand the scope of this beyond the banking space, but specifically in the financial services industry as well. I think there's increasing pressure, increasing expectations, as well as increasing responsibility on every banking institution, not just us here in the US specifically, to make use of the new technology, but also to make use of that technology for benefiting customers, benefiting members, and doing that in a responsible way. I think and that's the key of it. I mentioned that at the end, but that's the very piece that I want to focus on. We still operate in a very strict regulatory environment. The financial services industry is probably one of the most, if not the most regulated industry here in the US. The health industries, of course, health and medical care industries, definitely a contender for that top spot. But using all of the new technology, and then how we stay compliant with regulations, how we automate things, make regulatory compliance easier for us, not make it more difficult for us by bringing in new technology, bringing in new processes. That's really at the crux of it. I think what we strive to do as well is to strike a good balance between those things. We, of course, want to bring out new products and services that differentiate ourselves to our member clientele. We don't want to be just offering a Me Too product per se. Someone comes out with a, hypothetically, let's say a bank comes out with a chatbot here in the US. We don't want to be just quickly rushing to the table and say, oh yeah, Me Too. We have another similar product here that you can use for managing your money with us at the credit union. Not exactly. And we strive to do things in a much more nuanced manner, in the sense that, how much do we know about our members? How much do we know about their needs? How much can we anticipate? All of that factors into the whole process. You might have seen when I was talking about my transformation journey since I've joined here as well. I was trying not to put a term to it, not trying to call it a cloud transformation, not trying to call it a data transformation, not call it a specific name, because it is so much more than that, right? If we call it a cloud transformation, then it becomes all about the technology. It's really not about that. It's about people change as well. It's about changes in processes. It goes beyond just the name and what it brings along with that, right?
That's very interesting, very refreshing to hear, in a way, that kind of new ways of describing the transition towards operational excellence internally as being people-centric rather than technology-centric. Yes. That seems to be a bit of a shift. I'd love to hear from anyone in the audience as to whether you are also adopting that slightly shifted way of operating. Perhaps that might actually speed up the pace of change around certain things that you're implementing, or the order in which you give priority to things that need to be changed internally around the people in the organization. I mean, obviously, thinking about change management, that does make sense, doesn't it? Because if we make sure that people are well provided for, then hopefully they will make sure that the organization is working to the best of its ability. So putting people first does seem to make sense. But that seems to be a very new way of thinking about things. How does that work with the whole drive towards automation then? Because that isn't sort of putting people first, but it's also bypassing people at the same time, potentially a little bit, because you're certainly giving more tasks across to computers than previously. The benefits obviously will be scaling, but I wonder how that also affects the balance of staff in your units.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's bound to be skepticism, right? With new waves of technology, there's always skepticism in the existing workforce about how this affects us, how much this affects headcount, how much this affects the roles and responsibilities that we have day in and day out. I think a key way to manage that, a key way to ensure that we don't miscommunicate the consequences of new processes and new technologies being brought in is strong communication. Even now, I think really introducing the whole change to a workforce, or just to people in general, is really at the crux of it. When we bring about changes within the enterprise, I think we do a really good job of doing that at Navy Federal, really highlighting the benefits that it brings. If we say you are able to process 10 loan applications in hypothetically an hour, just being hypothetical, it doesn't need to be real, but 10 applications in an hour, let's say we say, yeah, in the future with the new technology, you could probably be able to scale that to 20. And even that is a huge benefit from a processing perspective. So really focusing on the productivity angle rather than focusing on how that affects the headcount, how that affects people in terms of job eliminations and things like that. And fun fact, actually, I would like to throw this out here as well. Navy Federal, actually, speaking to my org, has never had a single layoff in history, actually. This is on our Wikipedia page as well. We don't actually lay off people, even if situations are extenuating. Circumstances like that, they drive us to really hone in on the roles and responsibilities of the organization, rather than and the people within the organization, rather than looking at ways of reducing headcount and stuff like that. So there have been many waves, even during my presence. It's not unusual for us to have a reorganization of sorts, where we might have changed responsibilities, we might have changed roles within the organization, moved teams, moved organizations within the enterprise to take on new roles that help us function better. That's a better way of working that we've found as an institution, rather than reducing headcount. So yeah, that fact, you can fact check me as well. That fact lives on our Wikipedia page. But I think that also hits at the crux of your question, Georgina. So much change. How do we deal with folks being skeptical about how that's going to impact them and their livelihoods working with the company? I think, yeah, the productivity angle, as I said, plays a key part, communicating that folks are going to be more productive. And facts like these hold us in good stead. And the other aspect is, I think I kind of glossed over this in our previous session with Michael and Stephen, training. I think we have really robust programs to train and upskill people within the enterprise. Accelerator programs that are conducted by centers of excellence. We have multiple centers of excellence. One is devoted to OPEX, but there's many more that devote themselves to different areas. I think what we do is we do a good job of training folks, coming up with accelerator programs where folks can really take the time to participate alongside their day-to-day responsibilities to really learn new things. And that opens doors for them to either do better in their current role, or even seek roles within the enterprise in other teams, right? Folks really have that confidence that if they have acquired a new skill set as a part of being in a new accelerator program, they have the flexibility to move teams within the enterprise to a role that they think better suits them with that new skill set that they have acquired. So those are a few things that come to my mind.
That certainly really makes Navy Federal stand out in terms of how you run as an organization in never having layoffs. That's almost unprecedented to hear that. So it's a fantastic achievement there. It sort of reminded me of learning to drive, and my instructor always telling me, you don't actually need to brake if you prepare well enough and you use your gears.
Exactly.
You can get around sudden moves. And I guess it's the same principle. So, very well done on the organization for looking after staff in that way. I guess thinking about that and the practicalities of that really, in order to create proper operational excellence internally, means that you have to be looking a long way ahead to anticipate what's going to be happening, both with the market, your customers' needs, but also the pace of change of technology, to make sure that you've got everybody in the right place before the crunch point comes. So what are the key trends that you're seeing coming forward over this next decade ahead that you're busy preparing for and getting staff in place for and getting the technology in place for? What do you think are going to be the most pertinent issues that we're all going to have to really pay attention to going forwards then?
Yep. I think two to 3 points come to my mind. First is, of course, planning. We need to continue to do our planning very well, as we have done so in the past. Probably stick to some of our tenets that we've had in the past as well. I'm not one to speak for the entire organization, but from my perspective as an employee, I see planning happening really well in terms of future scope, future expansions that we want to do as an organization. Our membership, since I've joined, this information is also public information. Our fact sheet says that we've expanded in terms of membership here at Navy Federal. And that's not a small amount. We've actually expanded sizably. And in order to deal with that much increase in membership, we of course need to plan better in terms of headcount growth, in terms of technology adoption. All of those things have been done very well by our leaders at Navy Federal so far. And I would definitely hope that we continue to do that for sure. The second thing is, I think, continuing to differentiate ourselves as a provider of financial services and products. I think we need to continue doing that. With every new technology, we stand the challenge of not just building a Me-Too product. We spoke about that before, but really bringing in how much we can anticipate our members' needs before we actually build that product. That really needs to shine through in our processes and in our projects that we take up. Really building stuff with that knowledge, really showing members that we can anticipate their needs 1 or 2 steps ahead of time before we come up with new products and services via the new technology that comes in. I think that's still key to us. And the third piece, I think, that comes to mind is really staying in control of the cost angle. Some of the new technologies that are coming out today, let's speak about GenAI. I think since the technology has become so accessible, you and I, we both can use GenAI today without probably paying a single dollar or a pound for using it, right? Everything's free and open source. Unless you're looking for a specific solution, you don't really have to pay anything out of your pocket. So it's really low-hanging fruit these days in terms of how much you can build with it and how easily you can start using a technology. But as you start building these things out, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is the cost angle. How much are we expending in terms of resources? And resources also go threefold, right? How much are we expending? How much are we growing headcount to be able to use new technology? How much are we paying in terms of subscriptions? We spoke about cloud, right? Cloud comes with subscriptions. It's not on-prem, so you don't actually buy stuff and keep running it and just keep paying the power bills to keep it running. It's subscriptions that can also scale. If you speak about analytics, those subscriptions will grow in value over time if you have increasing number of products and services being developed on top of new technology. And the third angle is, of course, training. There's a lot of resources that go into training folks to be able to move from legacy systems to new systems and new technology. I think we need to be strictly in control of all of those things, we have this phrase, not drink the Kool-Aid entirely, but really be in control, really be sensible and reasonable about what we expect and how much this moves the needle for member experience. I think another key thing that you will see that Navy Federal does is we really focus on, if we're developing something, if we're coming up with a new product or service, how much does this move the needle for our member experience? How much is this going to help our members in their day-to-day lives? And of course, many of them find themselves, even if it's a specific clientele, they still are in different walks of life, each of them. So we try to look at things from that perspective. How much does this benefit them? We could build a chatbot, but does this really help our members? Does this really help them get answers quicker? Maybe does this get them? Does this help them get answers that are accurate as well? Things like that. I think we need to continue doing that in the future to maintain the position that we have in the industry today.
Absolutely. And I suppose that then brings us to that conversation about the permanency of the decisions that we're making as well. I mean, I have heard, and I'm sure many people in the audience have also heard, conversation about if you move to the cloud, would there ever be a situation in the future, if economic times are different, where we might have to come back out of the cloud and reclaim our own original servers just because of the cost that you would have to continue to provide for if you're renting cloud space forever and ever? In the same way, might there be a risk that we go a little bit too digitized, and then, you know, data is compromised as a result, which then means you need to claw back in the future? And meanwhile, what do you do with all the legacy equipment and systems that you're offloading and not using anymore? That in itself is a large cost that somebody has to put on a balance sheet somewhere. How are you yourselves managing that transition into the digital realm, and how cautious should we be as we move forward, would you say?
Right. That's a great point, Georgina. I often don't find myself thinking about this angle. We get so much into the cloud realm that we assume that this is the future and this is all there is to be done in the future. I think hedging our bets, to use the phrase, is really key. And we continue to do that. I don't think any company would be advocating or themselves practicing a complete cloud transformation. You know, if they had X amount of resources that were on-prem before, then I think any company should be moving all of those X resources over into the cloud. There's still a ton of benefit that's to be achieved by staying hybrid. Not go completely into the cloud, but maintain some of your operations on-prem. And also, speaking of hedging bets, I think one needs to look at multiple cloud providers. A great way of hedging your bets in the cloud spaces, you know, if something were to happen, if the impossible were to happen, a good way to distribute your risk. We get into the risk aversion realm here by saying that, yeah, use 2-3 cloud providers. Don't just stick to one cloud provider that might be subject to a massive cyber attack, or that might be subject to a massive disruption that uniquely targets itself and not other cloud providers that are competitors in that space. So I think just using multiple cloud providers and being able to distribute or spread out that potential risk is really key. We do that today, but I think we need to continue doing that in the future as well as we grow. Often, when we're trying to grow and scale resources, this can happen to fall by the wayside as a priority. I think it needs to be kept in mind in terms of planning, in terms of scoping, how we work with future projects. And then the other angle that we spoke about, just staying hybrid. I think in banking, we by default have to stay hybrid. There's a really nice restriction that comes in from compliance side. Compliance with regulatory rules and guidelines ensures that we probably, as banking institutions in the US, cannot be completely cloud-based. We have to continue maintaining some of our operations in-house in order to maintain the secrecy of data, maintain data that's not meant to be shared outside with any provider, that we don't have any justification to be hosting in the cloud remotely outside of our control. So those kinds of things, and really having, even if we store some data in the cloud, that is safe to do so, really having robust contracts, robust understandings of how it's going to be secured, what's the way of retrieving it in case of an anomaly, and things like that. Those are still very good practices. Just looking at backups and redundancies, we need to continue having that in this space as well.
Absolutely. And then also it's about, winning customer trust and winning internal trust, as you say, in order to make sure that the work that you can do is going to really be benefiting everybody, hopefully long term, and not accidentally going down one road and having to backtrack, which is really important, isn't it? Finally, just getting on to sort of security issues, how secure are we as we go into the digital realm? realm. We've heard a lot about blockchain and so forth and other ways to keep data safe. I know there's a lot being explored in terms of operational excellence on that side to make sure that, everything is dual factor. You want to make sure that people really can trust where their money's going to be. It's a very, very important issue within financial services. What kind of things are you yourselves conscious of looking out for from the security point of view at the moment?
Yep, I think there's two things that we try to do in this space, and I can speak more to Navy Fed than what the entire industry does. But one thing is definitely educating our membership and our customers. I think we strive to do that very well. Improving awareness within membership about possible scams, about possible target angles that cyber attackers and just malicious agents in general can take in terms of targeting their accounts, targeting their money that they hold within our accounts. All of those things are really key. I spoke about this in the previous session as well. Today, because we have so many avenues of serving customers and members, there's channels, we call it omni-channel banking, right? There's so many channels that banks are offering services. There's that many ways that attackers can target members and the bank directly in terms of our bottom line. And so we continue, doing a really strong job of educating people who are using our services and products to move their money, to do transactions. The second thing is really investing a lot of energy, time, and efforts in terms of using technology to combat that, the security angle. I think AI and machine learning has a very key role in playing defense against such attacks. I spoke about using machine learning for fraud detection and that type of things. I think we've done a great job as the industry overall of bolstering defenses using machine learning to be able to pinpoint what transactions and what kind of maneuvers might be looking like they have scam, they have fake transactions written all over them. We try to do a good job of that. And then, in general, just limiting our exposure, thirdly, to the different kind of applications or the different kind of channels that we offer in terms of moving money, in terms of making transactions. I think limiting those to a good extent. There's many ways of doing transactions here in the US. I'm sure there's many more possible ways in the UK as well. We try to see and monitor and be a good judge of which ones are more probable to bring in risk versus which ones are safe that we can administer and guide members using safely, securely to move their money and make transactions. So this is like a trifold approach that we take. I think we will continue doing that. Cyber attacks are not going down by any means. Same way scams that are not related to the cyberspace are not going down by any means. We have check fraud, all sorts of fraud that continue targeting the financial services industry. We just need to be continuing doing those things that we're doing today.
Absolutely. The issue of fraud is never not there, is it? Like as much as we all modernize, so do the fraudsters. But I guess it's about keeping ahead and keeping innovating, isn't it?
Yep. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much, Rahul, for joining us to share your thoughts. And I hope that that's resonated with you all in the audience as well as you go forward on your journeys towards fantastic operational excellence internally and externally in everything that you're doing. We were hoped to be joined by Agus today, Agus Sugianto, formerly of Wells Fargo. Very unfortunately, due to emergency circumstances, he's unable to join just at this moment in time, but we are expecting to be able to chat with him very soon within the network. So please stay tuned and we will let you know when that conversation is able to happen. But for now, thank you ever so much for joining us all. It's been fascinating to hear your thoughts on the future of operational excellence in financial services. And as we say, it's all changing so swiftly as we are forever modernizing and becoming more digital and more collaborative with people at the forefront as we go forward. So really great to hear about that and how change management is really taking such a fantastic foreground now in everybody's plans as we move forward. If you want to reach out to Rahul, I'm sure he would welcome it via LinkedIn or indeed to any of our other speakers today. Please do make use of the LinkedIn links, which you can find within the main lobby. And also just to direct you to the resources section, which if you're joining us on a laptop today, you should be able to see at the foot of your screen, where you'll be able to find a reminder to sign up for a webinar, which is happening on transforming B2B customer service, a blueprint for excellence in people, process and technology, which is happening in a few days' time. So please do take the opportunity to sign up while you're here. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again here soon for another great PEX Network conversation. All the very best.